And now, the forgotten video games of 1981.
Pat here, bringing you the forgotten video games of 1981. Make Tracks, a maze game by Williams where you try to paint while being harassed by fish. Yeah, that sounds normal. Battle of Atlantis, Comsoft's goofy yet challenging submarine shooter. Omega Race, Midway's bouncy asteroids clone that put your score and life information in the middle of the screen. And Bosconian, Namco's free-roaming space shooter, which was the first game to offer continues. Pump those quarters in! And those were the forgotten video games of 1981. Just because you don't remember them doesn't mean they weren't fun.
Bonus game.
Ultima and Wizardry. I don't give a damn about Ultima, so I'll let Rue or someone else cover that one. But I can talk about Wizardry. Oh yes, I can talk about Wizardry.
Ultima. This, many people see as one of the most important role-playing games developed. It was actually an offshoot, or it's kind of a reimagining and expansion, what have you, of a Calibeth. Both were created by Richard Garriott, who was a young, promising hobbyist programmer at the time. And actually he developed a Calibeth in high school. He developed Ultima during his freshman year in college.
It was an overhead RPG, simple graphics.
It took a lot of the gameplay of a Calibeth and just kind of tweaked it, made it more. It added quests. It added an overworld with the tile set graphics, which were impressive, very impressive for the day.
And you try to get to space somehow. For some reason, you end up in a space shuttle. It's a wacky game.
There were some strange things though. It was kind of like, it ran the whole fantasy gamut. You know, from old Wizards and Warriors up into sci-fi. You could buy a spaceship, space shuttle specifically, I believe. And there was like space shooter aspects in this RPG.
Like Dungeons and Dragons wasn't bad enough, preventing countless of tens of thousands of teenage boys from getting laid. This crap was dropped in their laps.
Wizardry was made in 1981 by Andrew Greenberg and Robert Woodhead, published by Surtech Games. And this is kind of the genesis of everything I love in RPGs. It's a first-person dungeon crawling game. And what was big about it for the time is that there's a lot of graphic in it. The maze is rendered very, very simply, but the enemies are rendered in color for the most part, as long as you're playing on an Apple II with a color monitor.
It was also the first PC role-playing game to use a true party-based system for your dungeon crawling experiences. So you would have not only one person to take care of, you had a whole group of people with different stats and abilities.
I think you could have up to 6 people in your party. You could choose their class, you could choose their alignment, you could choose, it was very much, both obviously were based off of D&D elements, but Wizardry was very much more of an almost straight D&D. You take the tabletop pen and paper and you put it in a computer program. This is what you get, Wizardry.
There's also a lot of puzzles in these games. Weird warp zones set up in the dungeons. Keep in mind, you don't have a map. You have to make your own map. Grab the graphing paper. You're not getting out of this unless you make your own map.
Back in my day, we didn't have manuals and maps.
So, you know, you hit a warp zone and you don't know where you are, and half the fun is figuring out how all these pieces, spinners, warp zones, etc., interact on a floor, sometimes between floors, to get you to your final goal.
And it really just jump-started the Japanese RPG market through Dragon Quest, later Final Fantasy, and of course, all the rest, all the tons and tons of Japanese RPGs that came out later. They all kind of draw their lineage to Ultima and Wizardry.
Arcade version.
Vroom! It's turbo!
So in 1981, graphics weren't very advanced, but this was, this was colorful, varying environments. The car could move not only left and right, but forwards and backwards on the screen on the road.
But you would have to pass a certain amount of cars in a certain amount of time. So, it made the game that much more challenging.
The interesting thing about the development of Turbo was that the programmer was actually hospitalized from exhaustion and a spontaneously collapsed lung. Now that is dedication.
most games were still one static screen and one overhead, usually an overhead perspective, and that was it. And here comes this game that's throwing 3D sprite scaling at you in 81.
Who's the company that made that?
Oh yeah, that's Sega.
Sega, they were cornering, it seemingly, the driving racing game market.
And in the early 80s, that's not hard to do because there's not much you can do with it.
It's either Turbo or Sprint. That was your choices, really, in 81.
Yeah.
Press start.
1981 brought on the masterful, incredibly interesting tabletop units.
Made by Coleco.
Tabletop games, baby. They look just like arcade games. You had the side art on them. You had the marquee.
Donkey Kong and Midway's Pac Man and Galaxian, the arcade games you can take home with you from Coleco.
There's some of the original Pac Man artwork on this one, like Pac Man with feet.
Yeah, I never understood this. I mean, it kind of looks more like a ghost than an actual Pac Man, and he looks kind of like perverted.
He looks like a cracked out, like, testicle with legs and red eyes. It's kind of messed up.
You had the control panel with the joysticks. These were really cool because you can play little handhelds and like a little Game & Watch, or you can play something else like a freaking arcade machine right in your home. And you know what? For the most part, they were decent games.
It was basically like the power of the arcade in the palm of your hand. Except it didn't quite fit in the palm of your hand. And it wasn't really the power of the arcade. So, yeah.
Well, the Donkey Kong one even has 2 levels represented in it, which is crazy. Most of them would only have 1, but that one's got the jump the barrels and the girders worked into it.
So you had Coleco getting on the action, licensing Nintendo stuff. Nintendo, Game & Watch, tabletops, they had those. You had, let's see, Entex came out with their versions. I think they did Defender, I believe. So you had all of these companies getting in on the action with these guys.
I wanted one so bad, my parents were like, no.
You had a lot of LCD handhelds that were cool. I mean, this was before you had a lot of, interchangeable cartridge, handheld portable gaming devices or anything like that. So LCD handhelds, yeah, that makes sense. But to have something that's so stationary and kind of big and bulky, I never really understood the appeal.
And I love these things because they tend to use VFD displays, vacuum fluorescent displays, which have all of the limitations of an LCD display, but it uses fluorescent light to create a very bright, colorful picture on the screen. So they look nice and they're fun to play, and they're appealing just from a design standpoint. By no means are these perfect, but they're excellent for what they are.
It wasn't anything I really wanted. I would rather have something that was handheld. I could take it with me in the car. Didn't, take 15 gigawatts of electricity to run.
And it takes 4 C batteries.
4 very old, ever-ready C batteries.
Apparently not ready because this unit is not working.
This one is off. These are ever not ready.
The only thing I didn't like about these, back then these were expensive.
They're still expensive.
The only kids I knew that had these were the freaking rich kids that lived across town that had like 5 of these, and I couldn't get one of them. Yeah, but I got them now.
I always hated that one kid in school who just got everything, just every little freaking everything that came out. Oh, look at me, I got an NES.
Yeah.
Oh, I got the Super Nintendo. Oh, I got the Nintendo 64.
Now they're highly, highly collectible and highly, highly valuable. They're not that cheap to acquire these days.
Yeah.
I got a 3DO. I freaking hated those kids.
I know. School. I remember I went to his house.
How the hell did you get a $600 because I'm rich and white?
People bought them, I guess. Mostly collectors buy them now because.
Here are the popular pinball games of 1981.
Hey everyone, Ian here with the popular pinball games of 1981. Fathom by Bally. Not only are you rescuing scuba divers amongst a crazy underwater backdrop, but you've got 2 crossover return lanes which let you save the ball in a number of different ways. Barracora by Williams. Backglass inspired by H.R. Geiger. Attractive fish women on the playfield, and the pinball isn't so bad either. And a personal favorite, Centaur by Bally. A great rule set, a stunning black and white playfield, and that centaur in the title? Half orc, half motorcycle. There is no table, more metal. And those were the popular pinball machines of 1981, because there's more to life than just video games.
Yars Revenge was my first project at Atari. It was a place I really wanted to be, and it was very important to me to make a contribution, to make a real splash with it.
Yars Revenge started as a port of Star Castle, and you can kind of see that in how the game plays.
But it occurred to me that I could just take some of the components, some of the elements of that game and reformulate them into something that would fit the 2600 and suit that well.
The goal is to chip away the shield around the co-tile and send a missile into the shield and destroy the co-tile.
I realized that if you take game functions that are buttons or stick moves and work them into game play instead, so that you earn a function instead of just pushing a button for a function, it enhances the game play.
When you eat away at the shield, it puts a missile behind you, and you can move the missile up and down as you move the Yar.
So by simplifying the controller scheme, I made it a more usable game and forced myself to enhance the design in a way that I think really improved the playability of the game.
Does anyone else find Yars Revenge a very trippy game? Like, something about that droning sound in the background and the stuff flying at you.
When I was playing Yars Revenge when I was a kid, this is what I envisioned for sure.
Were you eating acid?
You're eating the wall, and you're a fly. Man, it's some weird stuff.
What was Yar getting revenge on? Did the aliens kill his wife and kids? Like, well, why was it Yars Revenge?
I don't feel like the backstory was really fleshed out that well.
They actually have a full-fledged story going on here, which covers a couple pages.
And then I wrote a story. I think I was one of the first people to actually write a backstory for a game.
The game was about Yar of the Rossic solar system. So the joke was, it was basically Ray Kassar, the CEO of Atari. It was his name spelled backwards.
The interesting thing was that Ray had no idea about this. Ray knew nothing about this, but I just figured no one in marketing is going to have the balls to talk to Ray about it.
It's a unique game and a simple game, and because of that, it's one of those ones that I can easily waste 45 minutes on.
And ironically, it's known to be one of the best Atari 2600 games, developed by Howard Scott Warshaw, who developed E.T.
I really like it when people say E.T. is the worst game ever made, because people consistently talk about Yars Revenge as one of the best games that was ever made. So I figure that gives me the greatest range of any game designer in history.
Next level.
So Mrs. MRS is when a woman is married. Miss MISS is when a woman is not married. And MS, a woman doesn't want others to know whether she is married or not.
What's up with Ms. Pac Man? She doesn't want everyone to know that she's married to Mr. Pac Man?
She's ashamed of her marriage to Mr. Pac Man. Maybe Mr. Pac Man is abusive.
Well, I mean, come on, think about it. He's a druggie, for one thing.
He's a druggie.
One of the reasons that Pac Man was so popular because it appealed to both males and females. So Ms. Pac Man took that formula and, all right, girls are playing this game. Now girls are really going to want to play this because we have our first iconic, female video game character.
I think the single takeaway from Ms. Pac Man is how little difference there is between male and female. I mean, really all you need is a red bow and you separate the two genders automatically. I mean, there you go. I am now female. I feel so liberated.
Yeah, Ms. Pac Man was essentially almost like a homebrew.
Like a hack.
It was a hack.
Ms. Pac Man was originally designed by programmers at General Computer Corporation as an enhancement kit for Pac Man, and they called it Crazy Otto.
And then Midway, who had the rights to Pac Man in America, found out about these guys and said, hey, that looks cool. How about you just make that game for us and we'll pay you for that? And they said, sure, let's do that. And that became Ms. Pac Man.
They really should have called it Pac Man. It's way more catchier and politer.
This Pac Man, in my opinion, is better than Pac Man.
My opinion too.
Ms. Pac Man is special because it really takes the formula of Pac Man and improves upon it in almost every way you could hope to see.
Different maze combinations?
Different mazes. Bouncing fruit.
It changes up the AI of the ghosts so that you cannot follow the same patterns that you followed in regular Pac Man.
Faster speed?
Yes, it was a bit faster.
They tweaked the speed, the AI, the maze layout, and gave you something that was incredibly familiar and incredibly fresh at the same time.
I think Pac Man beats Ms. Pac Man. Not like in a game of, themselves, but
no.
Like domestically, I think he beats her.
Yeah, I think we gotta draw that conclusion that he is an abusive husband, and that's probably why she wants to deny the fact, or at least hide the fact that she is married to him. But come on, Ms. Pac Man, you're not fooling anyone.
If there's a Pac Man and a Ms. Pac Man, and then there's a baby Pac Man, and these guys are just like pizza pies, where are their sex organs?
Like two balls. How would they?
Well, well, one ingests a protrusion. That's is just theory, by the way. But one ingests a protrusion in the other's mouth and ingests DNA material. And I think what happens is pieces come off the other pack person, and almost like a la Mugwai.